An unsung tropical canna. Today in our wheelbarrow series class, we're going to talk about growing cannas in Kentucky. Cannas are not a true bulb. They're sold as a true bulb or as bulbs, but they're not a true bulb. They're generally not winter hardy as well, and if you want to make sure you keep them from year to year, you need to lift them. Some winters they will either freeze out or rot in the soil. It doesn't mean that you can't leave them for years and they're just fine, but there'll be that winter one year when they will have a really cold spell or a long wet spell and they will rot and you won't have those anymore. You can also start them indoors. You get a jump on flowering. And as we said, cannas are not a true bulb, although they are sold as such. So what are they? They're a rhizome. Rhizomes are enlarged horizontal stems. Yes, that's actually a stem that we're planting, and it's a modified storage unit for plants. It's the same type of thing that irises grow on rhizomes, Johnson grass grows on rhizomes. All those the little hair things you see are actually the roots. This is actually a modified stem. Sometimes you'll hear it called canna lily, although cannas are not lilies at all. They're not even in the lily family. They do have some close living relations to a couple of plants that we're very familiar with, such as banana. They're on the top left and ginger on the bottom right. If you've ever grown hardy banana, you know it has a large rhizome. Well, if you've ever cooked with fresh ginger, you also can tell that that piece of root that we're grating up and putting in stuff is actually a rhizome as well. Canna is the only genus in the family Cannaceae, and there are 20 known wild species, which is not a big family at all. It's native to the warm climates, believe it or not, of the southern United States all the way down to Argentina. And in some parts of the world, the Canna indica, which is the variety you see in the picture here, is actually invasive. If your grandmothers grew cannas 50 years ago, it's likely that this was the one they grew. It has the large green leaves, and it has a little small, almost peacock type blooms on it. The blooms are not near as showy on this variety as it is on our new varieties. Canna indica, again, this is the picture close up that you're probably familiar with that if you've been around many cannas, especially in our area. But it was the first species introduced into Europe and was thought to originate in India, although it's actually native to the Americas. And the indica is where the word comes from because they thought it was from India, so indica. And you know we use Latin for naming plants in their true name, not their common name. All cultivars and species of canna do originate though in America, or the Americas, I should say. Little trivia: the rhizomes are actually rich in starch and can be consumed by humans and livestock. This picture here, you can see where they've actually peeled the canna and roasted in the oven like a potato. The stems and foliage can be used for livestock fodder. Actually, the young shoots can even be cut and used as food for humans. And then the seeds can even be added to tortillas when they're young. When they're soft, when they get really hard, you wouldn't be able to eat them unless you ground them into powder. So here's the seeds. This is a close-up in the picture there. You can see the seeds are pretty big, about the size of a marble. They can be used. They have been used in musical instruments, in gourd rattles and things in jewelry in Africa. In India, the cannas are actually even fermented to make alcohol. You can think those tubers have alcohol and or have starch in them and sugars, which can be fermented. And then actually the plant fibers are really have long fibers in the plant itself, and they can be used as a jute substitute to make jute twine with. The fiber from the leaves can be made into paper as well. In some parts of the world, they actually do make canna paper. And the seeds can be used to make a purple dye. If you soak them, the water will turn a little bit purple. And then the canna plant has the ability to extract pollutants from wetlands. You can see in this picture here. This is just a large planting of cannas. It's probably naturalized in this area. And believe it or not, cannas can actually grow submerged in water. Kind of like a cattail would. And you know that they do have the ability to absorb toxins and things out of the water and take it up into the plant, which holds it there and helps clean the wetlands. And then in Vietnam, the canna starch is actually used to make cellophane noodles. You can see there if you're familiar with those types of noodles. And then in Thailand, the canna is actually a traditional Father's Day gift for fathers over there. The canna became very popular in Victorian times, and there were once over 500 cultivars, most of which are now extinct. They became very popular there for a while, and then it kind of fell by the wayside. And now it's making a resurgence. Since the 1960s, there have been at least 2,800 cultivar names. However, many of those are actually the same plant with just different names. If they do a genetic test, it's probably much less cultivars than that. Canna generalis, like this picture here, gives a bold, exotic look. It has attractive foliage and flowers. You can see you've got orange flowers, kind of a purplish red stem, and you've got green and yellow striped foliage. Flowers colors range from yellow, orange, pink, and red. There's even apricot now and some peaches out there as well. The foliage may be green, bronze, burgundy, or even variegated. This one is one of the variegated types. And various patterns. There's a lot of different things out there. Most do grow anywhere from 3 to 5 feet tall. The dwarfs are maybe 2.5 to 3 feet tall, and then the regular tall canna that we're familiar with about 5 or 6 feet. And then there are the giant cannas, which can go 8 to 10 feet. So there's a wide variety of heights in this family group now. Cannas do grow best in moist, well-drained soils in full sun. The hotter the sun, the better. That's what they really do prefer. They are really a warm weather plant, but they do like a moist soil as well. You want to water them once per week in dry weather. And then to promote growth, you want to fertilize once or twice during the growing season with a triple 10 or a triple 19. If you're using triple 10 and you don't have a soil test, do about a half a pound per 100 square feet. And if you're doing triple 19, then you would do maybe 2.5 pounds to 3 for that 100 square feet. You also want to remove your spent flowers to promote additional blooming, and I'll show you a picture in just a second how that maybe would occur. As far as planting, you can plant them outdoors after your last frost. They can also be started indoors in a greenhouse to get a jump on the season, which it's up to you how you do that. These really do start growing pretty fast once you get them growing in the spring, though. You want to plant the rhizomes about 4 to 5 inches deep and just cover them over with soil. And you also want to fertilize at planting, then again in midsummer or after the first big flush of flowers. So if you want to start some from seed, it is possible. The tropical series are the most popular seed-grown varieties. They include the All-America Selection winner, Tropical Rose. There's several cultivars in this series, and they all grow about 2 to 3 feet tall. So they kind of fall into that dwarf canna category. You want to sow your seeds indoors in mid to late February, and you want to cover the seed lightly with soil starting mix, water, and maintain your temperature at 70 to 75 degrees. This is a plant that really likes it warm, so it'd be a good idea to grow these on a heat mat to get that germination started a little quicker. And the germination takes about 7 to 10 days. And when the plants are large enough to handle, you can transplant them to individual pots. And remember, these are going to grow pretty fast, so keep that in mind and have a backup plan if you don't have enough room under your grow lights. The plants will require the most light possible, so either you're going to have an intense grow light or a greenhouse. And then the plants will flower from seed in about 90 to 120 days. You can see here, these are the seeds of the canna, and you can see the seed pod on the left. The indica variety makes seeds more often than any of the other varieties. That's why it can become invasive in some warmer climates. And then on the right, that's just a new little canna seed that's germinated. Do note there on the seed there's a little scratched mark. The seed coat on these seeds are really hard, so you may have to scratch that with a file and just break that dark, hard coat where the water can actually absorb into the seed. If not, the seed could take several years for that seed coat to break down where it can actually absorb water and germinate. As far as storage, cannas are not reliably hardy, as I said earlier in Kentucky. Wet soils generally rot them or they freeze in the ground depending on what type of season we have. So if you've got a really good spot and you get by with leaving them in the ground, that's fine. But just know there's going to come a year where they're going to be frozen out. So it's just it's a good idea to go ahead and plan to dig them each season. After a hard frost, you want to cut the plants back to about 4 to 6 inches tall. You can dig the canna clumps with a spade or a fork. If you cut a few, don't worry, they will heal over, and as long as they've got an eye, they will grow, or a little growth point, and that's an eye. These are not tubers. You want to leave a small amount of soil on the clump. It helps maintain some moisture. You'll see some will say to wash them off or shake the soil off. I'm not a fan of that. I think they dry out too much. In the video that I have a link on, the lady talks about maybe leaving some of that or washing them off and then packing them in peat. I don't think you need to do that. I think you just need to dig the clump, take the clump, leave a little soil on it, leave the clump intact, and then just put it in a storage bin to keep it in during the winter time. After allowing them to dry for a day or two, you can place the rhizomes, not tubers, I'm sorry, there's a typo, in a cardboard box, a plastic storage container without a top. Remember, do not leave a top on that. That would condensate and cause them to rot. You can also put them in onion bags, burlap bags, wooden bushel baskets, whatever. Is just basically it's just to hold those over until spring comes and it's time to plant them back. You want to store them in a dry, cool, dark place. 50 degrees is the best until spring. I generally just store mine at room temperature in a dark closet, and they do just fine. They do dry out more that way than they would in a 50-degree basement. However, to get around that, I leave more soil on that clump and leave the large clump intact. Now, I don't plant that large clump back. I will break them up in the spring, and I much prefer to divide those at planting time than to do it in the fall and then store them broken apart. And then all you're going to do is plant them back the following spring, and you know they're very easy plant to overwinter. These are the links to some YouTube videos that are good videos if you want to watch. The first one is actually from Horn Canna Farm, which is where the cannas for the class actually came from. And she goes through different methods of storing these. And if you're in zones 7, you're mostly safe for leaving the ground. 8, definitely safe. Here in zone 6B, maybe 7, it's just going to depend on the season and the year. You may go 4 or 5 years just fine, and then all of a sudden we have that one winter where they actually killed them out. So I would definitely store them in a place that's not going to freeze. She mentions a garage or a crawl space, something like that. Just make sure if your garage is unheated, if we have a really cold spell, it's probably going to freeze in there. So it's not a good place. I'd rather store them at room temperature in a closet in the house and to make sure that they're not going to freeze, even if it's a little bit warmer than they might like for the entire winter. The second video is just how to divide them in the spring. You can do it the real gingerly way, the way she does, and cuts them apart, or you can just take a spade on the big clump, cut it in two, and plant the 2 clumps. It's totally up to you how you want to do that. They're very forgiving in that aspect. So as far as buying your rhizomes, you want to buy from a reputable dealer. Make sure that there's no obvious bruising. You should have at least a rhizome with 3 to 5 growth points on it. That would be a premium canna. Anything less than that will still grow, but it'll take a while to make it a clump. Also, they shouldn't have any mold on them. They should feel firm and heavy and not light and dried out because they're probably not going to grow if they're that light. They should be just a nice, full, heavy rhizome. As far as maintenance goes, you want to water them thoroughly at planting. That's a big deal to get them started because they're kind of dried out by the time spring comes along. You also want to follow specific recommendations regarding depth of planting. Basically, you're just going to plant them 3 to 5 inches deep, maybe 6. It depends on how deep you want them. Remember though, don't put them too deep because you're going to be digging these back up, and they're going to kind of grab into the soil and kind of pull down a little bit more anyway. Also, you want to deadhead or remove spent blooms. And you can see there the canna growth or a bloom stalk will send out maybe 3, 4, 5 flushes of flowers and then stop. And you can see the old stalk there and the new one came out of that. Just cut that old one back, and then that new one there, it's flowering. There'll be another one come out from that. It'll do that a few times, and then eventually it'll stop, and then you'll just cut the entire top off. But don't leave that first one growing, because it will make seed, and we're not looking for seeds on these plants. We're looking for a nice big plant with more flowers. So when that stalk stops blooming, there'll be more come up, and there'll be more coming up as it's blooming, but there's no reason for it to put energy into seeds if that's not what we're looking for. You also want to maintain good soil moisture during the summer. These are pretty drought tolerant once they're established, but to get good flowers, you need to have plenty of soil moisture. The one main problem we have in Kentucky is this little pest right here, which is the Japanese beetle. It's kind of hard to protect the flowers when they're in full bloom because we can't spray flowers. We wouldn't want to spray the flowers because we don't want to kill the pollinators. So we're kind of, if it's a bad season for Japanese beetles, we can spray the leaves and keep those healthy and growing. We can spray those with something like 7, or we can go out and pick those off and put them in soapy water in the mornings when they can't fly. Or and then we're just going to have to sacrifice the blooms, or you could cut some of those bloom stalks off, bring them in the house, and enjoy them for a week or 2 in the house. So what's out there? This is the link to Horn's Canna Farm. You can see what's out there on their website. This one is a pretty new variety here. It's called Cleopatra, and you can see how the bloom is kind of, it's red, solid red with a yellow with a yellow speckle. No bloom is ever going to be the same on this plant, and also the foliage is green, but it does have some dark purple markings in it, and it's kind of marbled that way. No leaf looks the same on this plant either. It's just a real kind of novelty plant. Here's just a few pictures of some large-scale plantings of Cannas. Cannas do look nicer in clumps or in groupings because they have that nice tropical foliage, especially if you're growing the types with the colored foliage. It's really nice. And then you have all those flowers there too, but they just make a really big, bold display in the garden when they're planted in large groups. So I know that was quick, but cannas are very easy to grow. The big key to these are digging them for the winter and storing them and then planting them out after last frost. And other than that, in our area, the only thing that really bothers us much is the Japanese beetle. There is the canna leaf roller that can be problems, but it's more of a problem down south where cannas are actually perennials. If you have any questions about cannas or any other gardening questions, you can call me at the Washington County Extension Office at 859-336-7741. Happy gardening!